She suppressed her power for a century to escape a prophecy until the Alpha King uncaged her darkness. When an Alpha King who has scorned destiny for 1,000 years discovers his prophesied queen carries two warring powers, one that can bring salvation to his cursed people, and one that craves his own immortal life. He must choose between the solitary reign he has always known and the woman who could be his eternal dawn or his final dusk. Can love rewrite a fate sealed in blood, or will the very bond meant to save them unleash an ancient darkness powerful enough to consume them both? Chapter 1. The Obsidian Throne. Alaric, king of Nocturne, sat upon the Obsidian Throne, a monument carved from the heart of a fallen star. For a millennium, he had ruled the hidden city of Alphas with a detached precision that bordered on apathy. Emotion was a currency he had ceased to trade in centuries ago, a relic of a mortal life he barely remembered. His kingdom was an intricate mechanism of shadow and blood, and he was its stoic, unfeeling engineer. The Grand Hall was a cavern of polished basalt and silver inlay, lit by the ethereal glow of captive moonwisps. The air was cold, still, and silent, just as he preferred it. Below the throne, his council of ancients stood like statues, their immortal faces impassive. They brought him reports of blood tides, territorial disputes with the Lycans, and the ever-present decay of their magic. Alaric listened, his silver eyes missing nothing, his mind processing the information with the cold logic of a calculating machine. He issued his decrees in a low, resonant voice that carried the weight of ages, and his word was law, absolute and unquestionable. Yet, for the past few weeks, a subtle disquiet had taken root in the barren soil of his soul. It was a faint, unfamiliar restlessness, like the pre-tremor of an earthquake deep within the planet's core. He dismissed it as a symptom of the approaching crimson equinox, a celestial event that always unsettled the delicate balance of their world. Far below the splendor of his throne room in the labyrinthine archives known as the Silent Stacks, a woman named Valeria moved with a quiet grace that made her almost invisible. For over a century, she had served as an archivist, her days spent among the whispers of decaying parchment and forgotten histories. She was a phantom in the catacombs of knowledge, her presence unassuming, her demeanor meticulously unremarkable. This anonymity was her shield, her sanctuary, her survival. Each morning, she would unstopper a small lead-lined vial and swallow the bitter alchemical liquid within, a daily ritual to maintain the fragile peace of her existence. It was a price she paid gladly for the silence, for the beautiful, numbing quiet that kept the storm within her caged. Chapter 2. Whispers of the Equinox. The royal council chamber was an echo of the throne room, but more intimate, the darkness here thick with conspiracy and ancient rivalries. Alaric presided from a high-backed chair at the head of a long obsidian table, his fingers steepled before him. The topic, as it had been for weeks, was the crimson equinox. "The celestial alignment is less than a fortnight away," intoned Elias, Alaric's oldest advisor. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each one earned over 2,000 years of service to Alaric's bloodline. "The omens are unsettling. The moon wisps flicker, and our scryers report a tempest in the ether." Across the table, Ravenna scoffed, her crimson lips twisting into a smirk. She was a vision of dark beauty, her ambition a palpable force in the room. "Omens are the superstitions of lesser creatures, Elias. Power is what matters. The equinox will amplify our strength. It is an opportunity we should be prepared to seize, not fear." "The prophecies of the equinox have always warned of revelation and upheaval," Elias countered, his voice a dry rustle of parchment. "They speak of bonds being forged and fates being sealed." Alaric's gaze remained fixed on the flickering candlelight. "Prophecies are the ghost stories we tell ourselves to give meaning to chaos," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "I have seen empires rise and fall on the whims of so-called destiny. I do not believe in it. We will double the sentries at the Veil and ensure our blood reserves are secure. The equinox is a cosmic anomaly, nothing more. We will endure it as we have endured everything else." His brother Lucian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Where Alaric was ice, Lucian was a slow-burning fire, his emotions always simmering just beneath the surface. "Brother, perhaps we should not be so quick to dismiss the old ways. The texts speak of the equinox as a time of awakening. What if there is a truth we have overlooked?" Ravenna's dark eyes gleamed with a cunning light. Lucian is right to be cautious, Your Majesty. An awakening could change everything. She let the words hang in the air, a veiled threat wrapped in a silken ribbon of concern. She spoke of prophecies, but Alaric knew she was truly speaking of power and her insatiable desire for it. He silenced them all with a single sharp gesture. My decision is final. We will prepare for a physical threat, not a metaphysical one. But as he dismissed his counsel, the strange restlessness stirred within him again, a dissonant chord in the silent symphony of his existence. He felt a pull, a faint magnetic tug toward the deepest levels of the citadel, toward the silent, dusty heart of his kingdom where forgotten things slept. Chapter 3. Ascent of Starlight. The disquiet followed him for days, a persistent shadow at the edge of his consciousness. It led him, against his own logic, down winding staircases carved into the very bedrock of the mountain upon which Nocturne was built. He told himself he was seeking a specific text, a pre-Vesuvian tome on blood magic that might explain the magical fluctuations of the Equinox. It was a lie, and he knew it. He was following an impulse, a flicker of something that was not his own cold reason. The silent stacks were a world unto themselves, a city of shelves that reached up into oppressive darkness. The air was thick with the scent of dust, decaying paper, and time itself. It was a place of absolute silence, a silence even Alaric, a connoisseur of quiet, found profound. He found her in a small candle-lit alcove, bent over a large, unbound manuscript. It was Valeria, the archivist. He had seen her before, a fleeting presence in the periphery, but he had never truly looked at her. Her dark hair was simply tied back, and her clothes were the plain gray robes of a scholar. She was the epitome of unremarkable. And yet, as he drew closer, he was struck by an inexplicable sense of recognition. It was not a memory, but an instinct, an ancient part of him stirring from a 1,000-year slumber. He stopped a few feet from her, his presence a sudden weight in the delicate atmosphere of the archives. She looked up, her eyes a startling shade of violet, widening in surprise. She immediately rose and curtsied, her movements fluid but reserved. Your Majesty, she whispered, her voice like the gentle turning of a page. I was not aware you would be gracing the stacks tonight. I require the Sanguis Arcanum, he said, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the hallowed quiet. Of course. She turned to a nearby shelf, her focus absolute as she located the heavy, leather-bound book. As she passed it to him, her fingers brushed against his. A jolt, like lightning, shot up his arm. It was not magic as he knew it, but something else entirely, a searing, brilliant energy that felt both alien and intimately familiar. For a fleeting instant, the oppressive scent of dust and decay was overwhelmed by something impossible. It was the fragrance of starlight on a cold night, of ozone after a lightning strike, of something pure and wild and utterly out of place in the heart of his shadowed world. He recoiled slightly, his composure momentarily fractured. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. The scent vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the faint herbal aroma of the suppressants she took, but the memory of it was burned into his senses. Valeria kept her gaze lowered, but he saw a flicker of panic in her violet eyes before she masked it. Will there be anything else, my king? He took the book, his mind reeling. No, he said, the word clipped. That will be all. He turned and walked away, the ancient tome in his hand forgotten. The restlessness in his soul now had a name, a face, and a scent, and it smelled of impossible things. Chapter 4. The Crimson Tide. The night of the crimson equinox, the sky above Nocturne bled. The veil that hid their city from the mortal world shimmered, and the captured moon wisps pulsed with a feverish ruby light, bathing the obsidian architecture in an apocalyptic glow. A palpable energy coursed through the city, a raw, untamed magic that made the very stones hum and stirred the blood of every alpha. Alaric stood on the highest balcony of his citadel, observing the celestial event with a forced detachment. Below, the city was uncharacteristically agitated. His people were on edge, their instincts heightened, their hunger sharpened by the cosmic tide. He could feel it too, a primal energy coiling in his gut, waking parts of him that had slept for eons. He was the most powerful being in his kingdom, and the equinox's magic sang to his blood, calling to the ancient beasts that dwelled beneath the placid surface of the king. Then it happened. It was not a sound or a sight, but a feeling, a seismic shift in his very soul. A bond, forged in the heart of the Crimson Torrent, snapped into place with the force of a physical blow. It was a cord of brilliant, undeniable energy, latching onto his essence and pulling, demanding, claiming. 1,000 years of emotional solitude shattered in a single instant. He felt a desperate, agonizing need for a counterpart he had never known he lacked. His fated mate, his queen. He staggered back, a hand clutching his chest as his dormant heart clenched with a pain that was also a profound, earth-shattering pleasure. The beast within him roared to life, a wild, possessive predator that cared nothing for crowns or councils. It wanted one thing: her. And with the awakening came the scent. It flooded his senses, no longer fleeting or subtle, but a raging, intoxicating torrent of starlight and lightning. It was raw, untamed, and pouring from the heart of the city. It was Valeria. Her scent was a beacon in the crimson chaos, and every fiber of his being screamed for him to find her, to claim her, to protect her. The stoic king vanished, consumed by the primal force of the bond. Logic, reason, and a millennium of self-control were swept away by a tidal wave of instinct. He launched himself from the balcony, his form dissolving into a stream of shadow and speed. Heedless of the gasps from his royal guard, the hunt had begun. The king was gone. Only the predator remained. Chapter 5. The Hunt of Ages. He moved through Nocturne like a wraith, a blur of darkness propelled by a singular, desperate need. The city, already chaotic under the crimson sky, became a mere obstacle in his path. The voices of his people, the concerns of his kingdom, they were meaningless noise against the siren song of her scent. The bond was a physical thing, a golden thread pulling him taut, and the fragrance of starlight was his guide. His ancient instincts, honed over 1,000 years of survival and dominance, were in complete control. His mind, usually a fortress of cold calculation, was a maelstrom of possessive, protective fury. Find her, ours, protect, claim. The words were a litany, a prayer to a god he didn't believe in. The trail led him away from the grand avenues and into the forgotten corners of the city, down to the older, quieter districts near the foundations of the mountain. It grew stronger, more potent, laced now with the sharp tang of fear and pain. Her fear, her pain, which lanced through the bond and into his own heart, fueling his frantic speed. He found her in a secluded, crumbling courtyard, hidden behind the ruins of a pre-founding temple. She was collapsed at the center of the courtyard, her body convulsing. But it was not the darkness of their kind that afflicted her. A brilliant, terrifyingly pure golden light pulsed from her body in waves, fighting against the crimson magic of the Equinox. It was the light of the sun, of a holy fire, a power so anathema to their existence that it should have incinerated her from within. She was whimpering, her hands clutching her head as she writhed on the cobblestones. "No, please, stay hidden." The two forces, the innate vampiric darkness amplified by the Equinox and the impossible surging light from within, were tearing her apart. Her scent was a frantic, chaotic symphony of shadow and starlight. A war zone of conflicting essences. Alaric materialized from the shadows, his approach silent. He saw the lead-line vial lying shattered beside her and understood. Her suppressants had failed, overwhelmed by the raw power of the Equinox. The thing she had kept caged for a century was breaking free. He ignored the searing pain as her holy light washed over him, a sensation like being submerged in acid. All he saw was his mate, his queen, in agony. He knelt before her, his mind screaming at the sacrilege of the light, but the bond roared louder, demanding he soothe her, protect her from the storm raging within her own soul. "Valeria," he breathed, his voice a low growl of possession and concern. She looked up, her violet eyes swimming with tears and glowing with a terrifying golden power. When she saw him, her expression shattered with a new wave of horror. "Stay away," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'll destroy you." But he didn't listen. He reached for her, his ancient predatory nature compelling him to pull his mate from the fire, even if it meant being burned alive. Chapter 6. The Unveiling. He swept her into his arms, ignoring the way her uncontrolled light magic sizzled against his immortal flesh. He moved faster than thought, a shadow streaking through the city back to the impenetrable sanctum of his private chambers. He laid her gently on a black velvet chaise lounge, the brilliant gold of her aura a stark and horrifying contrast to the room's deep shadows. The pain from her touch was fading, but the memory of it, a holy purifying fire, was a terrifying new discovery. As the peak of the equinox passed, the violent pulsing of her inner light began to subside, retreating back behind the veil of her control, though a faint golden shimmer still clung to her skin. She lay breathing heavily, her face pale and stained with tears. The storm had passed, for now. He stood over her, the possessive beast within him warring with the bewildered king. "What?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Are you?" She curled in on herself, a profound shame radiating from her. "I am an abomination," she whispered, her voice cracking. She sat up slowly, refusing to meet his gaze. "The suppressants I take, they are not just for show, they are all that keep the balance. The crimson equinox, it was too strong." "Balance what?" he pressed, his silver eyes narrowed. "That light, it is the power of our most ancient enemies. It should not exist within one of our kind." Finally, she looked at him, her violet eyes filled with a century of fear and loneliness. "That is because I am not entirely one of your kind. I am a hybrid. My mother was an alpha queen of a noble line. My father was a daywalker." The name struck him with the force of a physical blow. The Daywalkers, a mythical race of beings born of light who were said to be the antithesis of alphas. Their touch a purifying fire to the undead. They were thought to be extinct, hunted down in the ancient wars millennia ago. A union between the two was not just forbidden, it was considered a cosmic impossibility, a perversion of the natural order. "Impossible," he breathed. "And yet, here I am," she said, a bitter sadness in her voice, "a creature of two warring halves, the Alpha's shadow and the Daywalker's light. The suppressants dampen the light, keep it dormant, hidden. Without them, it would consume me, or I would consume everything around me." She gestured to the prophecy she had been studying in the archives. "There was a prophecy that foretold my birth. A hybrid queen, born under a bleeding moon, who would hold the power to either save our people or destroy them utterly." She had been hiding not just from the world, but from her own devastating potential. From a destiny she never asked for. He stared at her, the impossible, beautiful, terrifying creature who was his fated mate. The bond between them hummed, a tangible connection that cared nothing for prophecies or bloodlines. It cared only that he had found his other half, and she was a living paradox, a walking cataclysm. Chapter 7, An Echo in the Blood. The days following the equinox were a study in disruption. The bond to Valeria had fundamentally rewired Alaric's ancient soul. A millennium of cultivated apathy was being eroded by a tide of new, unwelcome, and utterly overwhelming emotions. He felt a constant, low-level thrum of protectiveness, a primal need to ensure her safety that was so powerful it was a physical ache in his chest. When she was in another room, he was acutely aware of her absence, the bond stretching taut between them like an invisible tether. He found his attention wandering during council meetings, his thoughts drifting to the quiet archivist now housed in a suite of rooms adjoining his own. His inner circle noticed the change immediately. "You seem distracted, Your Majesty," Elias observed, his ancient eyes missing nothing as Alaric stared into the middle distance during a report on Lycan border skirmishes. "Your focus is not entirely with us." "I am merely contemplating the strategic implications," Alaric lied, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. How could he explain that he was trying to decipher the lingering scent of Starlight on his own robes? Lucian was more direct, cornering him in the royal library. "What has happened to you, Alaric? Ever since the equinox, you're like a different man. You watch the archivist as a hawk watches its prey? The court is whispering. They say you've been ensorcelled." "The court can whisper all it likes," Alaric retorted. A flash of anger, another novel sensation, surprising him with its intensity. "My affairs are my own." "Not when they affect the stability of the throne," Lucian argued, his own passion flaring. "You brought this unknown woman into your private chambers. You look at her with... I don't even know what to call it. It's not like you." It wasn't. The cold detachment that had been his armor for 1,000 years was gone, replaced by a fierce, burning possessiveness. The thought of anyone else looking at Valeria, of anyone speaking to her, of anyone posing even the most remote threat to her sent a wave of savage fury through him. He had spent his entire reign treating emotion as a weakness, a fatal flaw. Now he was drowning in it. And the most terrifying part was that he found he didn't want to be saved. He wanted to pull her deeper into the flood with him. He was a king who had forgotten how to feel, and his fated queen was a symphony of sensation he was utterly unprepared for. Chapter 8. The Sun-Scorched Prophecy. He found her in the private library connected to her new chambers, surrounded by the very texts she had once curated. The prophecy was spread out on a large oak table, its brittle pages illuminated by a single candle. Her face was etched with worry as she traced the ancient, faded script. "You've been avoiding me," he stated, his voice softer than he intended. She didn't look up. "I have been trying to give you space to process, to reconsider. The bond is a powerful thing, my king. It can cloud judgment. My judgment has never been clearer," he countered, moving to stand beside her. He looked down at the prophecy, at the words that had defined her life of hiding. "From the union of night and day, a queen of twilight shall arise. In her veins, a war of blood and light. She shall be the salvation that scours the darkness from our cursed lands, or the damnation that consumes the night's greatest king in a blaze of holy fire. It says you will either save us or destroy me," he said, his voice flat. "I have spent my entire life terrified of the second possibility," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "The suppressants, the hiding, it was all to ensure that this prophecy never came to pass, that I would never be in a position to fulfill either destiny." "You hoped you were wrong about the bond," he realized. "You felt it too, whenever I was near." She finally met his gaze, her violet eyes deep with a sorrow that tore at him. "I felt a pull, an echo. I prayed it was my imagination. I saw how you ruled Alaric. Cold, solitary, unshakable. I knew if you ever felt the bond, you would see me as either a tool for salvation or a threat to be eliminated. You would not see me." Her words struck a chord of uncomfortable truth. Had he discovered her before the equinox, before the bond had shattered his defenses, he would have done exactly that. He would have treated her as a strategic asset or a liability. "What changed?" he asked, his voice low. A faint blush crept up her neck. "You did," she admitted. "That night in the courtyard, when my light was burning everything it touched, you came for me, you held me, you didn't recoil from the part of me that could destroy you. In that moment, I thought, maybe the prophecy isn't about what I am, but what I choose to be." Her courage, her hope in the face of such a terrifying destiny, took his breath away. He reached out, his fingers tracing the edge of the ancient parchment, coming to rest beside hers. He felt the hum of their connection, a silent promise in the candlelit room. "Then we choose together," he declared, the words a vow. "We defy this prophecy. We write our own fate." But as he looked at the final, damning line, "His love shall be the key that unlocks her final form," a sliver of cold dread pierced his newfound conviction. What if his love was not the thing that saved her, but the very catalyst for his own destruction? Chapter 9. The First Challenge. The challenge did not come from the shadows, but strode boldly into the throne room, clad in crimson and silver. Lilith, daughter of the ancient and powerful Volkov clan, had arrived. The alliance with her clan had been in negotiation for decades, a strategic marriage that would unite the two most powerful vampire bloodlines and secure Alaric's reign for another millennium. She was beautiful, powerful, and politically perfect, and she had come to claim her position. "Alaric," she said, her voice like velvet-wrapped steel as she bypassed all protocol and approached the throne. "I received your summons. I trust the final arrangements for our union are ready." She cast a dismissive glance around the court, her eyes finally landing on Valeria, who stood quietly in the shadows near the dais. "And I see the castle has acquired a new pet." The beast inside Alaric roared. The insult to Valeria was a physical blow, and his protective rage surged, hot and venomous. "Be careful how you speak, Lilith," he warned, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that silenced the entire hall. "You are addressing the future queen of Nocturne." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled nobles. Lilith's perfectly composed face momentarily faltered, replaced by a flash of disbelief and fury. Her? She hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. This shadow-skulking librarian? You would discard 100 years of negotiation, an alliance that would make our people stronger than ever, for a nameless waif? Her name is Valeria, Alaric stated, his voice ringing with an authority he hadn't used in centuries. He rose from his throne and descended the steps, coming to stand beside Valeria, taking her hand in his. The message was unmistakable. He was choosing her, publicly and unequivocally. She is my fated mate. My bond is to her. The alliance with your clan is no longer a consideration. The political implications were catastrophic. He was not just rejecting a bride, he was spurning the Volkovs, one of his most powerful and volatile allies. He was choosing an unknown, a nobody, over the stability of his entire kingdom. Lilith's eyes narrowed into slits of pure hatred. You are a fool, Alaric. You have let this creature bewitch you. The clans will not stand for this. You have chosen a stray over an empire. You will regret this. You will see this kingdom burn for your sentimentality. She turned and swept from the hall, her rage a palpable storm left in her wake. The court was in an uproar, the nobles murmuring in shock and outrage. Alaric had just drawn a line in the sand, choosing his bond, his heart over his crown. He looked at Valeria, who was staring at him with a mixture of awe and terror. He had just declared war on his own world for her sake. And as he met her violet gaze, he knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he would do it again without a moment's hesitation. Chapter 10. The Sorceress's Web. In the chaotic aftermath of Lilith's departure, Ravenna emerged as a voice of calm, insidious reason. While others panicked, she projected an aura of serene wisdom, positioning herself as a mediator, a confidant. She approached Alaric and Valeria in the king's private study, her expression one of deep, maternal concern. A bold move, my king, she began, her voice a soothing balm. But a dangerous one. You have alienated the Volkovs and shaken the foundations of the Coven. To secure your position, and Lady Valeria's, you will need allies. Allies who understand the deeper magic at play here. Alaric watched her, his senses on high alert. He had never trusted Ravenna's ambition, but she was a renowned scholar of magical lore. What do you mean, Ravenna? Ravenna's gaze shifted to Valeria, her eyes filled with a false sympathy that made Valeria's skin crawl. My dear child, I have studied the ancient texts. I know of the Daywalker lineage. I know of the prophecy. She paused, letting her words sink in. And I know about the suppressants you have been taking for the last century? Valeria froze, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. How could you possibly know that? I make it my business to know things, Ravenna replied smoothly. And my research suggests your situation is far more perilous than you believe. The alchemical compounds in those vials, they are a crude tool. They do not simply dampen your light magic, they starve it, they poison it. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Tell me, my dear, have you noticed the light becoming more volatile, more aggressive, harder to control? Valeria thought of the searing pain she'd inflicted on Alaric, the way her light had felt less like a part of her and more like a caged, furious animal. She could only nod, her throat suddenly tight. As I thought, Ravenna said with grim satisfaction, you have not been suppressing a part of your soul, you have been corrupting it. You have been turning a force of potential salvation into a ravenous, destructive entity. The suppressants have not been protecting you. They have been creating a monster inside you piece by piece for the last 100 years. Alaric looked at Valeria, saw the dawning horror on her face, and felt a cold dread wash over him. The prophecy spoke of a queen who would bring damnation. What if it was not her nature, but the very methods she used to hide from it, that would make the prophecy come true? What if, in trying to cage the beast, she had only made it stronger, angrier, and infinitely more deadly? Chapter 11. The Prophecy's Poisoned Root. Ravenna led them to her private scriptorium, a chamber filled with forbidden texts and artifacts that hummed with a dark, unsettling power. From a locked, iron-bound chest, she produced a scroll of blackened, brittle vellum. It was not a copy, but an original text, its script written in what looked like dried blood. The version in the royal archives is a sanitized retelling, Ravenna explained, her voice hushed with theatrical reverence. This is the original prophecy, transcribed from the ravings of the oracle who witnessed the first and last Daywalker Alpha union. She unrolled the scroll carefully. The text was archaic, the language twisted, but the meaning was terrifyingly clear. It did not speak of a dual-souled queen offering a choice between salvation and destruction. It spoke of something far worse. The Twilight child is a vessel for the Purifier, she read, her finger tracing the blood-red letters. An echo of the sun's first fire, born into shadow. Its nature is not to heal, but to cleanse. It sees all darkness as a corruption to be annihilated. It will seek out the greatest shadow, the oldest night, and it will burn it from existence. The Purifier, Alaric repeated, the words tasting like ash. It is not a light soul, Ravenna clarified, her gaze intense. It is a separate consciousness, a primal entity of light magic that has been trapped within your bloodline for generations, Valeria. It is less a part of you and more a passenger, a parasite. It does not want balance. It wants domination. Its sole purpose is to eradicate darkness. And Alaric, she said, turning to him, you are the greatest darkness in this world. Valeria felt the blood drain from her face. This was a nightmare far beyond her deepest fears. She wasn't a hybrid, she was a host. A living cage for a creature of holy fire. The suppressants, she whispered, understanding dawning like a black sun. We're not just starving it, Ravenna confirmed. They were enraging it. Every dose you took was like poking a caged lion with a sharp stick. For a century, you have been torturing a being of pure, destructive energy. And now, thanks to the Equinox, the cage is broken. The bond to Alaric is not a symbol of hope, it is a beacon. The Purifier within you now has a target. It can feel him, sense him, and it hungers for him. Alaric looked at Valeria, at the woman he was inextricably bound to. He saw not a mate, but a time bomb, a beautifully crafted vessel for his own annihilation. The prophecy wasn't a choice between two outcomes, it was a death sentence. And his own fated bond was the trigger. Chapter 12. The Light That Burns. The weight of Ravenna's revelation settled over them like a funeral shroud. An unspoken tension now existed between Alaric and Valeria, a constant humming fear that made every interaction fraught with peril. He tried to remain detached, to analyze the situation logically, but the bond pulsed with her anxiety and self-loathing, flooding his senses and making objectivity impossible. He found her standing on a balcony overlooking the sleeping, shadowed city. She was wrapped in a simple dark cloak, her silhouette fragile against the eternal night of Nocturne. I should leave, she said, her voice so quiet he barely heard it. I should run. Hide where it can never find you. And where would you go? He asked, coming to stand beside her, careful to leave a few feet of space between them. The bond connects us. It doesn't matter how far you run. I will feel you, and the Purifier within you will feel me. Then you should kill me, she whispered, the words breaking her. Before it can, it would be a mercy. The beast inside him snarled at the very thought. Never, he growled, the word a vow torn from the depths of his soul. He closed the distance between them in a single step, his self-control shattering. He couldn't bear her despair. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. We will find a way. We will fight this. Together. Her violet eyes swam with tears as she leaned into his touch, a desperate, shuddering sigh escaping her lips. In that moment of shared vulnerability, of raw, desperate connection, something shifted. Her fear gave way to the Purifier's fury. A brilliant, golden light exploded from her. It was not the gentle glow he had seen before, but a searing, incandescent blast of power. He felt a pain so absolute, so alien, it brought him to his knees. It was the pain of unmaking. The light wasn't just burning his skin, it was trying to annihilate his very essence, to unwrite the dark magic that gave him life. He saw a flash of cold, impersonal hatred in her eyes. Not her hatred, but the Purifier's. He cried out, a sound of pure agony that no one had heard from him in 1,000 years. Just as quickly as it came, the light receded. Valeria stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth in horror. The front of Alaric's tunic was scorched. An angry, blistering wounds, glowing with a faint golden light, marred the perfect pale skin of his chest. Wounds that, he realized with a terrifying clarity, were not healing. Alaric. She sobbed, staring at what it had done. The scent of burned shadow and holy fire hung in the air between them. The monster had shown its face, and it had branded him with a fire that even his immortal body could not quench. Chapter 13. The Coven's Judgment. News of the attack spread through the citadel like wildfire. Lucian and Elias were the first to arrive, their faces masks of grim horror as they saw the golden, unhealing wounds on their king's chest. For the first time, Alaric looked vulnerable, mortal. An emergency council session was convened, not in the formal chamber, but in the heavily warded vault deep within the castle, a room reserved for matters of kingdom-ending importance. Valeria was not invited. She was, for all intents and purposes, a prisoner in her chambers. Alaric sat at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone, betraying none of the slow, agonizing burn of the Purifier's fire. "The evidence is irrefutable," Elias began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The prophecy is not a choice, it is a curse. The creature she hosts is a direct threat to your life, Your Majesty, and therefore to the stability of the Coven." "It wasn't her," Alaric stated, his voice a low growl. "I saw her eyes. She fought it." "And she lost." Lucian slammed his fist on the table, his usual warmth replaced by cold, desperate fear. "Alaric, I saw your wounds. They are not healing. That thing, it can kill you. It can kill any of us. We cannot allow sentiment to blind you to the reality of the threat." Ravenna, ever the voice of reason, spoke with clinical precision. "There are ancient methods, rituals designed to contain such entities. The Aegis casket can imprison her, placing her in a timeless stasis, and the ritual of severance can be used to cut the bond that tethers the Purifier to you." Sever the bond? The words felt like a violation. The bond was a part of him now, woven into the fabric of his being. "It is the only way to blind the creature to your presence," Ravenna insisted. "Sever the link and you remove the target. She will be contained and you will be safe." "You speak of my maid as if she is a disease to be quarantined," Alaric snarled, the beast within him clawing at the surface. "She is the carrier of one." Lilith's voice cut through the tension. She stood at the chamber's entrance, invited by Ravenna, her face a mask of vindictive triumph. "The Coven demands action. We will not be ruled by a king who is tethered to his own executioner. The ultimatum is this: you will agree to have her chained and the bond severed, or we, the United Clans, will do it for you. We will rise up and take the crown to save our race from the Purifier you have brought into our midst." The threat was clear. It was a coup, veiled as a necessity. He had to make a choice: sacrifice Valeria to save his crown, or lose them both. Chapter 14. A Bond Forged in Fire. He defied them all. The council, his brother, the threat of civil war, none of it mattered. The thought of imprisoning Valeria, of willingly severing the connection that had become as vital to him as blood, was an agony far greater than the fire that still burned on his skin. He went to her chambers, dismissing the guards posted at her door with a single menacing glare. He found her huddled in a window seat, looking out at the eternal night, her form radiating a misery so profound it felt like a physical force. "They are right," she said, her voice hollow. "You should have let them lock me away. It's the only logical solution." "I have not been guided by logic since the moment I first saw you," he replied, his voice rough with an emotion he could no longer name. He walked toward her, and she flinched away, pulling her hands back as if he were the flame, not her. "Don't," she pleaded. "Please don't touch me. I can't be sure it won't happen again." He saw the terror in her eyes, not of him, but of herself, of the destructive power she carried. And in that moment, he understood what he had to do. He would not let her be defined by the monster she hosted. Ignoring her pleas, he reached for her, his hands closing gently around her wrists. She gasped, a fresh wave of golden light flickering across her skin, a prelude to the Purifier's rage. He felt the familiar, searing heat begin to build. But instead of pulling away, he held on tighter. He met her panicked gaze, pouring every ounce of his will, his love, his absolute conviction, through their bond. "It will not control you," he said, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "You are not its vessel. It is a part of you, and you are stronger than it is. I am not afraid of it, and you will not be, either." He pulled her from the seat and into his arms, bracing himself for the agony. The light flared, searing his wounds anew, and he gritted his teeth, refusing to make a sound. He held her close, a silent testament to his faith in her, his refusal to let fear win. He was choosing her, all of her, the gentle archivist in the holy fire, the light and the shadow. And then, a miracle. The burning subsided. The savage alien consciousness of the Purifier seemed to recoil, confused by his lack of fear, by his willing acceptance of the pain. Slowly, impossibly, the golden light softened, retreating until only Valeria, trembling and sobbing, remained in his arms. "How?" she whispered against his chest, her voice choked with disbelief. "Because its power comes from fear," he murmured, his lips against her hair, "and I will never fear you." In that moment, their bond was reforged. It was no longer just a product of fate or magic, but a conscious choice, a pact made in defiance of prophecy and pain. It was a bond forged not in starlight, but in fire. Chapter 15. The Kingdom Cracks. Alaric's defiance sent shockwaves through Nocturne. By publicly refusing the Council's ultimatum, he had chosen his mate over his kingdom, and the consequences were immediate and severe. The Volkov clan, led by a vengeful Lilith, formally withdrew their allegiance, taking with them nearly a third of Alaric's military might. Ravenna, playing the part of a concerned diplomat, used the growing schism to her advantage, quietly persuading smaller, wavering houses that the king's judgment was compromised, that his obsession with the Purifier Queen was a madness that would doom them all. The kingdom was cracking along ancient fault lines. Rebellion, once a whispered threat, was now an open conversation in the shadowed halls of the city. Sentries reported skirmishes on the borders of Volkov territory. Blood tithes from rebellious provinces ceased to arrive. Alaric's authority, absolute for a millennium, was eroding with each passing day. The final blow to his reign came during a public address in the Grand Plaza. Alaric had intended to project an image of strength and unity, to quell the rising panic. He stood on the central dais, Valeria by his side, her hand held firmly in his. He spoke of loyalty, of the strength of their coven, of weathering the storm together. But the crowd was hostile, their faces a mixture of fear and anger. A noble loyal to Lilith shouted from the crowd, "How can we trust a king who sleeps with our destruction? She is a monster." The accusation struck Valeria like a physical blow. Her control, already fragile from the constant stress, wavered. A faint, telltale shimmer of golden light flickered around her. It was barely perceptible, a momentary lapse, but in the tense, terrified atmosphere, it was a spark on a powder keg. A child in the front of the crowd, the young daughter of a merchant, screamed and fell back, not from any real injury, but from sheer terror at the sight of the unholy light. The crowd surged, panic erupting. It didn't matter that no one was hurt. They had seen it. They had seen the monster. Alaric and his royal guard were forced to retreat back to the citadel amidst the chaos, but the damage was done. The incident was all the proof his enemies needed. Ravenna's whispers became a roar. The king was protecting a creature that was a danger to their children. He was no longer a protector, he was a liability. The cracks in his kingdom had become a gaping chasm, and civil war seemed not just possible, but inevitable. Chapter 16. The Betrayal Unmasked. The public disaster drove Alaric to act. He refused to believe that Valeria's condition was simply an accident of birth. Ravenna's convenient knowledge, the perfectly timed political fallout, it felt engineered. Leaving Lucian in command of the Citadel's defenses, Alaric began his own clandestine investigation, using ancient skills of espionage he hadn't employed in centuries. He focused on the suppressants. Valeria had gotten them for a century from a reclusive alchemist in the city's underbelly. Alaric found the alchemist's hidden workshop, only to discover the old alpha had been dead for years, his body little more than dust and bones, but his ledgers remained. Sifting through decades of coded records, Alaric made a chilling discovery. The formula for the suppressants Valeria had been receiving had been subtly altered 80 years prior. A new, almost undetectable ingredient had been added, a rare alchemical agent known as Wraith's ire. It was a substance that didn't just dampen magic, it agitated it, destabilized it, caused it to fester like a poisoned wound. He followed the supply chain for the Wraith's ire, a trail of shadow payments and intermediaries that took him deep into the web of Nocturne's underworld. And at the center of that web, like a patient, venomous spider, was a name he recognized: Ravenna. The truth crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't a tragic fate, it was a meticulously crafted conspiracy. Ravenna hadn't just discovered Valeria's condition, she had cultivated it. For 80 years, she had been systematically poisoning Valeria, intentionally corrupting her light magic, turning the dormant Purifier into the volatile, aggressive monster it had become. She had been grooming Valeria as a living weapon, a perfect catalyst to create a crisis that would allow her to seize power. Every attack, every loss of control, every step closer to the prophecy's fulfillment had been part of Ravenna's grand design. He returned to the Citadel, a cold, silent fury radiating from him. He went straight to Valeria's chambers, the alchemist's ledger in his hand. "It wasn't you," he said, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost silent. "None of it. You've been manipulated, poisoned." He showed her the evidence, the proof of a betrayal that spanned nearly a century. Her suffering, her guilt, her self-loathing, all of it had been a lie, engineered by the very woman who had pretended to be their ally. The monster within her wasn't a product of her nature, but of another's ambition. Chapter 17. The Purifier Unleashed. Just as the truth was revealed, Ravenna made her move. She had felt Alaric's discovery through her own web of scrying spells. Her careful, decades-long plan was exposed. There was no more time for subtlety. From her scriptorium, she enacted a powerful, brutal ritual. It was a spell of unmaking, aimed not at Alaric, but at the alchemical poison within Valeria's system. With a single resonant incantation that shook the foundations of the Citadel, she didn't just neutralize the Wraith's ire, she shattered it, causing it to detonate within Valeria's magical core. In Alaric's chambers, Valeria screamed. It was a sound of pure, soul-tearing agony. Her body arched and the golden light exploded from her, no longer flickering or contained, but a raging, uncontrollable nova of holy fire. The gentle archivist was gone, her consciousness utterly submerged. The being that stood in her place was terrifyingly beautiful and utterly inhuman. It was tall, radiant, its form composed of pure, blinding light. Where Valeria's violet eyes had been, there were now two miniature suns, burning with a cold, impersonal fury. This was the Purifier, fully and horribly unleashed. It turned its gaze on Alaric, and there was no recognition, no memory of the bond. It saw only shadow, corruption, an ancient darkness that had to be scoured from existence. "Abomination," it said, its voice a symphony of celestial choirs and cracking flames. "Your night is over." It moved with the speed of light itself. The battle was not a battle, it was an execution. Alaric's own formidable power, his speed, his strength, his dark magic, they were useless. Every shadow he summoned was instantly incinerated. Every defensive ward he raised shattered like glass. The Purifier's touch was annihilation. It tore through his chambers, the holy fire unmaking everything it touched, reducing ancient artifacts and obsidian walls to dust. Alaric was thrown across the room, his body battered and burned. The unhealing wounds on his chest flared with agonizing intensity. He was facing a god, a primal force of nature against which he was utterly powerless. The prophecy was being fulfilled, not by a conflicted queen, but by a divine monster wearing her face. Chapter 18. The King's Final Choice. He was cornered in the ruins of his own throne room. The Purifier advanced on him slowly, a radiant, implacable god of destruction. Its light so intense it was beginning to unravel the very shadows that held Nocturne together. His strength was failing. The holy fire had taken its toll and his immortal resilience was gone. He was dying. Through the shattered archway, he could see his royal guard, Lucian at their head, holding the line against the encroaching forces of Lilith and Ravenna. They were fighting a civil war while their king was being executed by a being of light. The kingdom was falling, his life was ending, and the woman he loved was lost inside an avenging angel. It was the ultimate defeat. Elias appeared at his side, pressing a gnarled obsidian artifact into his hand. It was the Soul Breaker, an ancient, forbidden weapon capable of severing any magical bond or connection. "Use it, my king," the old alpha pleaded, his face etched with despair. "It is our last hope. Sever the bond. It may kill her, but it will break the Purifier's anchor to this world. It will save the city. Alaric looked at the artifact in his hand. It was one choice: destroy the bond, kill the woman he loved, and perhaps save his people. The other choice was symbolized by the heavy iron crown that had fallen from his head during the battle, now lying half-melted on the floor. His duty, his kingdom. He was faced with the same impossible decision the council had given him, but now it was real, immediate, and final. His life and his kingdom, or his faith in the woman trapped inside the fire. He looked past the radiant, terrifying form of the Purifier, trying to see her, to find some flicker of Valeria within the divine storm. He thought of her quiet strength, her courage, her hope that she could choose her own destiny. Ravenna had tried to turn her into a monster, a weapon. If he used the Soulbreaker, if he chose to destroy her to save himself, would he be any better? He would be proving Ravenna right, that Valeria was nothing more than a threat to be neutralized. He looked at the Soulbreaker in one hand and the molten crown on the floor. His kingdom or his queen. His duty or his love. In the blinding, all-consuming light of his own impending doom, he finally made his choice. He let the Soulbreaker fall from his grasp, shattering on the obsidian floor. He would not become the monster they wanted him to be. He would not sacrifice her, not even to save himself. Chapter 19. The Harmony of Blood and Light. As Alaric made his choice, a frantic figure slipped through the chaos of the battle outside and into the throne room. It was Celeste, Valeria's only friend from her long years in the archives, a mousy, unassuming vampire no one ever noticed. In her hands, she clutched a slim, leather-bound journal. "Wait," she cried, her voice trembling but resolute. "You're all wrong. It's not a parasite." She ran to Alaric's side, thrusting the journal into his hands. "It's Valeria's mother's journal. I found it hidden in her old rooms. Read it." With the Purifier bearing down on him, Alaric opened the book. The script was elegant, feminine, and filled with a mother's love and fear. The words painted a picture not of a cursed vessel, but of a miraculous birth. "It is not two souls," the journal read. "It is one soul with two halves, two essences. The shadow and the light. They are not meant to fight for dominance. They are meant for harmony, for balance. Like dusk and dawn, they are two parts of a single whole. The prophecy is a warning, not a damnation. Suppression will only enrage the light. Dominance will only starve the shadow. The key is acceptance, a unity of self." A final passage, written in a shaky, fading hand, made Alaric's breath catch in his throat. The prophecy speaks of a mate's love unlocking her final form. It is true. Her fated bond is not a beacon for destruction. It is the catalyst for harmony. He is the anchor for her shadow, she the dawn for his light. He must not fear the fire, he must embrace it. He must give his darkness freely, not as a master, but as an equal. Only then can the Twilight Queen be born. It wasn't a monster to be caged or a parasite to be severed. It was her, all of her. Ravenna's poison had created the conflict, forcing two halves of a single soul to war against each other. The solution wasn't to destroy one half, but to unite them. And he, her fated mate, held the key. He was the bridge. Hope, fierce and brilliant, flared in his chest. Chapter 20. The Equinox of the Soul. The Purifier raised its hand, a spear of pure light forming, ready for the final, killing blow. Alaric looked up, not at the radiant god, but at the woman within. He saw this not as a battle, but as a ritual. An equinox of the soul. He rose to his feet, ignoring his grievous wounds. He dropped all his defenses, letting his own dark, ancient magic fall away like a discarded cloak. He stood before the creature of light, utterly vulnerable, his arms open wide in a gesture of complete surrender and absolute trust. "Valeria," he said, his voice calm and steady, resonating not with command but with love. He poured his entire being, his memories, his feelings, his 1,000 years of darkness through their unbroken bond. "I am here, I am not your enemy, I am your other half." The Purifier paused, its head tilting as if in confusion. The spear of light flickered. "It is not a curse," Alaric continued, taking a step forward into the searing aura of her power. "It is your strength. Your light does not need to destroy my darkness. It needs to balance it. Let me be your anchor. Let me be your shadow, and you can be my dawn." He walked directly into the inferno. The pain was beyond anything he had ever imagined, a holy fire consuming him from the inside out. But he did not fight it. He embraced it. He reached out and placed his hand over her heart, over the epicenter of the storm. And then he did the one thing the Purifier could never have anticipated. He offered it his lifeblood. He sank his own fangs into his wrist and pressed the wound to her lips, not in submission, but in offering. An offering of his own essence, his darkness, his very soul. "We are one," he whispered as his blood, the darkest magic in the kingdom, met the purest light. For a moment, the light flared, threatening to consume them both in a final apocalyptic explosion. But then, something shifted. The darkness did not extinguish the light, and the light did not annihilate the darkness. Instead, they began to merge, to flow into one another, swirling together like ink and water. The raging golden inferno softened, its color shifting to a breathtaking swirl of silver and gold, of violet and shadow. The divine, inhuman form of the Purifier dissolved, coalescing back into the shape of Valeria. She collapsed into his arms, the storm finally, truly, at peace. Chapter 21. The Final Confrontation. When Valeria opened her eyes, they were no longer just violet. They were galaxies of twilight, swirling with the soft light of dawn and the deep, comforting shadows of dusk. An aura of immense, perfectly balanced power radiated from her, both light and dark, held in a harmony that was more beautiful and potent than either could be alone. She was whole. At that moment, Ravenna and Lilith swept into the ruined throne room, their rebel forces behind them. They had breached the final defenses and had come to witness their victory. They stopped dead, their faces contorting in shock and disbelief. They saw not a dead king and a divine monster, but Alaric, his wounds already beginning to heal under the gentle touch of Valeria's new magic, standing with his queen. "Impossible," Ravenna breathed, her centuries-old composure finally shattering. "The Purifier should have destroyed you." "There is no Purifier," Valeria said, her voice a perfect chord of light and shadow. "There is only me?" Enraged by the collapse of her grand design, Ravenna acted. She gathered all of her dark, corrupted magic and unleashed it in a single, desperate attack, a torrent of shadow and soul fire aimed directly at Valeria. But the woman who faced her was no longer the frightened archivist or the volatile host. Valeria simply raised a hand. A shield of twilight, of interwoven light and shadow materialized before her. Ravenna's attack struck the shield and instead of shattering it, was simply absorbed. The dark magic was neutralized, unraveled by a power that understood both sides of its nature. Valeria, with Alaric standing steadfastly at her side, was untouchable. The rebellion was over, the lie was broken, and the true queen had finally taken her place. Chapter 22. Twilight Triumphant. Before the assembled remnants of the court and the defeated rebel forces, Alaric and Valeria laid the full truth bare. Celeste presented the journal. Lucian produced the alchemist's ledgers. The evidence of Ravenna's century-long betrayal was undeniable and overwhelming. The nobles who had followed her looked on in horror, realizing they had been pawns in her obsessive quest for power. Defeated and exposed, Ravenna made one last desperate gambit. "You may have balanced the storm for now," she shrieked, her voice cracking with madness. "But the Purifier is still within her. A single taste of true power will unleash it again." She produced a hidden artifact, the heart of the first shadow, a crystal pulsing with concentrated primordial darkness. She hurled it at Valeria, a final attempt to overload her, to force the darkness to dominate the light and prove her right. The crystal flew through the air, but Valeria did not move to block it. She simply stood, calm and serene. The artifact struck her chest, and instead of corrupting her, it dissolved into her twilight aura. The darkness was welcomed, accepted, and woven into the harmony of her soul, making her power even more complete. She had not just balanced her two halves, she had integrated them. The demonstration was absolute. She was not a host to a dangerous power, she was the power, and it was hers to command. Lilith, seeing the undeniable truth and the depth of Ravenna's depravity, was the first to act. She strode forward, knelt before Valeria, and bowed her head in fealty. One by one, the other rebel lords followed suit, their allegiance shifting from the failed conspirator to the true Twilight Queen. Chapter 23. The Twilight Queen. Valeria's fully realized power was a force of creation, not destruction. She reached out, her hands glowing with her unique twilight magic, and touched the still festering wounds on Alaric's chest. Where the Purifier's holy fire had burned and refused to heal, her balanced magic soothed and restored. The golden, angry scars faded, leaving his immortal skin flawless once more. This was her true nature, she realized. Not a savior who would scourge the world with fire, nor a destroyer who would consume the night. She was a unifier, a healer. She walked through the ruined throne room. Where her power touched the scorched, crumbling stone, new life began to bloom. Pale, silver-glowing moss and night-blooming flowers that thrived in the twilight of her aura. She could heal the very curse that afflicted their people, the slow decay of their magic, the barrenness of the land that surrounded their hidden city. She was the balance they had been missing for millennia. The assembled vampires watched in stunned, reverent silence. They were witnessing the birth of a new age. This was not the feared Purifier or the coveted weapon. This was their salvation, a queen whose very presence promised not just survival, but prosperity. She was not a queen of shadow or a queen of light. She was the Twilight Queen, and her kingdom would be one of dusk and dawn, where both halves could finally live in peace. Chapter 24, The New Nocturne. Months later, Nocturne was transformed. Under the joint rule of Alaric and Valeria, the city was revitalized. Valeria's twilight magic healed the magical decay that had plagued their race for centuries. In the heart of the castle, where the sun had never reached, a breathtaking twilight garden now grew, filled with impossible bioluminescent flora that thrived under her care. Alaric, no longer the cold, detached monarch, ruled with a compassion and wisdom he had never known he possessed. Valeria's love had not just saved his life, it had restored his soul. He listened to his people, he engaged with his council, his strength now tempered by her grace. He was a better king, a better man, than he had been for 1,000 years. They ruled as two halves of a whole, his ancient strength and her harmonizing wisdom, creating a reign of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The schism with the other clans healed, old rivalries forgotten in the face of this new, hopeful future. Nocturne, once a city of cold stone and creeping decay, was now a place of quiet beauty and vibrant living magic. The eternal night had given way to a gentle, perpetual twilight. Chapter 25, A Kingdom of Dusk and Dawn. Years later, on the anniversary of the Crimson Equinox, Alaric and Valeria stood on the balcony where he had first felt the bond snap into place. Below them, the city celebrated, not with fear, but with joy. The festival was now a celebration of balance, of the unity of light and dark. In the Twilight Garden, their children, two young vampires who carried their mother's twilight eyes and their father's quiet strength, played among the glowing flowers. They were the first of a new generation, born into a world without the ancient curses, a world of hope. The prophecy was right, Valeria mused, leaning her head against his shoulder. A queen arrived who would change everything. It was right about the queen, Alaric corrected, his arm tightening around her. But it was wrong about her destiny. It is not our fate that defines us, but the choices we make, the love we choose to embrace. He looked down at the woman who was his mate, his partner, his queen, the woman who had been his prophesied doom and had become his eternal dawn. Together, they had defied a destiny written in blood and fire. They had not just saved their kingdom, they had remade it. They had created not a kingdom of night, but a kingdom of eternal dusk, a sanctuary where light and shadow could dance together in perfect, breathtaking harmony. Their reign was not one of power, but of partnership, built on the undeniable truth that the greatest strength is found not in dominance, but in balance.